The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling,
whether you like it or you don't like it,
needs us. The IWC is about as happy as it's ever been in the 9.5 years I've been doing this program. All of you are happy. Oh, look, no Vince. Triple H is making changes. Oh, look, we get certain people being brought back. Look at Bayley in the faction now. Look at Tommaso Ciampa getting a U.S. title shot. Oh, look at this. We're not worrying about Austin Theory. He's kind of being shoved down to the ground now. Oh, we're getting these changes over at NXT. We're getting long matches now in the main event. Look, 2.3 million viewers on Raw. Yeah. It's all curiosity at this point. Now, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, and I'm also not trying to be cynical. You know, as my old co-host Jeremy G always talked about, I need to make sure to keep myself positive here, not go completely negative, and he's right. I need to do that. Shout out to you, Jeremy. And so I have to think about that and consider all these different variables and say, listen, I'm always concerned about the product. Now, I will say that without Vince McMahon, the product is stable. But we said this before. Do you remember about that? This is what I want to explain to all of you real quick. Because even though you are happy right now where things are and the various issues of where Vince was holding and handling things of what he was doing. Let me take you back to June 2019. Remember when Paul Heyman was announced Executive Director of Monday Night Raw and Eric Bischoff Executive Director of SmackDown? Do we all remember that? And then it only took about 1 year and Vince McMahon snuffed it all out. Just took it all away. Eric Bischoff no longer returned. Paul Heyman came back in as an advocate to Brock Lesnar and then to Roman Reigns. That's it. And remember how excited we were when you saw all the changes that were going on while Paul Heyman was executive director. In his directorship, he was pushing Angel Garza, the Street Profits, and Drew McIntyre. And of Drew McIntyre, he said he was a godsend to WWE. Quote, I'm very proud of Drew's accomplishments. I'm very proud of the individuals themselves for all that they have achieved and the greatness of the performances that they ever over-delivered. Now, here's the thing. Of those names, Street Profits, elevated to the tag titles, but, I mean, they're at a certain plateau right now. And now we're seeing the difference in booking where most likely Montez Ford will split off. Who's going to be face or heel, we'll find out. But Drew McIntyre was a very important name right there. Because in that 1 year, Drew McIntyre, plus also the same thing can be said with Bobby Lashley, they were both featured prominently in main event roles. Now, it wasn't the best thing where Bobby Lashley was being booked into, a relationship with Lana and the whole deal with Rusev, but it was a main event angle in many cases. And people got into it, even though it might be salacious and tabloidistic and, very much Attitude Era like. That's not really necessarily the interest that there might have been before, the Attitude Era. But the salaciousness, that soap opera kind of feel to it, it was interesting to me. It might have been a car wreck, but I liked it. Liv Morgan being a part of that, remember that? It's the first time we actually saw Liv Morgan kind of outside of everything with the Riot Squad and being featured here. Drew McIntyre was on the ramp to becoming a star. By June 2020, when he left, we already know that Drew had the Royal Rumble, had the tossing out of Brock Lesnar, and Drew becoming the WWE, he became the WWE champion, right? All of that going on at that time. Drew McIntyre became a star. And this is after coming back from Impact Wrestling. And when he was booked with Dolph Ziggler and the whole tag team thing, Drew McIntyre, under Paul Heyman's vision, was being pushed as a main eventer. In a short amount of time. And Drew McIntyre, to the credit of Vince McMahon and others, I'll give him credit, they've kept him as a main eventer. And now, Drew McIntyre, 3 years later, is now going to Clash at the Castle. He is in the main event of one of the biggest shows in the UK, 90,000 plus at Principality Stadium in Cardiff, Wales. He's going to main event against Roman Reigns as the most credible opponent after Brock Lesnar that could go after Roman Reigns. Talk to me about the names we have that came from NXT that got called up to the main roster who are main eventing now. Bianca Belair? Okay. Who else? Who else is at that same level right now? And don't give me the whole thing about, well, Triple H was running the whole show the whole time. No. Listen. This is what you have to understand here about Triple H. And this is the credit he gets. Even when he had a little bit of control and he was doing things as the COO and he had a figurative role on TV. Remember that? No Confidence? Triple H concerned himself with the mid-card, with the undercard. The mid-card mattered to him because he knows build that mid-card to main eventers. Right. But he's always working on the mid-card. And that's been his bread and butter. Work on the middle of the card to make the show fluid and, put some good booking sense in, put some good matches in. That's the whole point. But my issue is the main event. Because you see that Triple H isn't going to make any wholesale changes right now to the main event. Because I bet you WrestleMania plans, I don't think, have gone anywhere near changing right now. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen next year at WrestleMania in Hollywood, a big show. But what you have to ask yourself is, what is going on now with constructing from top to bottom? I mean, who are the people you see right now that could become interesting? That could become main event worthy? Because that's the part you have to also consider as well. Sure, the women's division's one thing, but the women's division has a lot of different stars, and there are not any particular titles right now on the women's side that are so solidly booked for one person who is so dominant. Like Ronda Rousey lost. Liv Morgan's the champion now. She beat Ronda Rousey. We had that happen. We're going to get a rematch with those two now coming up, right? Clash of the Castle, I believe. So Ronda's having trouble taking Liv Morgan and getting her belt back. So there's something there about that. Then you have to consider the fact that Bianca Belair has a load of different things going on with her belt because Bayley's back. You had Asuka and Alexa Bliss now facing each other. You know that they're always in the mix because Alexa Bliss has already vocally talked about wanting to become champion again. Asuka's been there. She's always considered in the main event into that championship level. And then Bianca has to deal with the other stars that she has. So, there you go. And Becky Lynch is out of the picture. So that whole picture right there, that main event level for the women's division is great. SmackDown, you're going to start seeing the tag team titles be noticed once again. And the U.S. and Intercontinental titles are going to be important. Obviously, with Gunther over there, with the IC champ, I don't think there's going to be any much change over there with who's going to be holding that belt from Triple H's standpoint. And with the U.S. ciampa, let's see if Tommaso Ciampa is the one that gets to go ahead and take out Bobby Lashley to become U.S. champion, or does Lashley retain? But Ciampa now, first time getting title opportunities on the main roster after being a long-time NXT champion. So that's nice. That's still all mid-card. The women right now, you haven't built certain stars that are within the women's division. Bianca Belair is at the level of being at a WrestleMania, of closing out a WrestleMania event with the right person. Ronda Rousey, the same thing. They could close out the first night of a WrestleMania in Hollywood. I don't think anybody would say anything different about that. But who is the opponent that's going to go ahead and elevate that match to be a main event match? You can't just have one person and then just have a contender. It can't just be a contender. It has to be a top contender, an overwhelming top box office draw to make that match important. So you got this time now to build up to get there. 8 months. Where do you go? And who do you build up between now and the Rumble? Because right now we know the Survivor Series, unless Triple H has some idea, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference of what's going to happen between now until day one. Because day one is when things will actually matter. When that main event picture has to be solidified. Where we know where things are right now to day one, to the Rumble, to WrestleMania. We have to see what that is right there. In the meantime, sure, take the main event, take the mid-card, let's build that up. Hey, look, just on the curiosity of what Triple H was going to do booking, and just for the fascination of fans to see, oh my goodness, no Vince, how's the show going to be booked? Well, Raw got 2.3 million viewers. Okay. And right now, WWE's NXT 2.0, 649,000 viewers, up from 600,000. And the rating in an AT49 demographic did go up 0.15. Ranked number 7 in the top 150 shows for cable for the night. There you go. And people don't necessarily talk about ratings, but we can only talk about that. Variety.com actually talked about it and put a big deal about it. A 2-year high in the ratings. A 2.3 million viewers, 0.6 in the 18 to 49 demographic. And that is, first of all, 21% improvement in viewership, 20% improvement in the key demo. Okay. My only thing was that with NXT, and I was always concerned about that, was the viewership and how many younger fans are actually following along and watching the product. Something got here. Something happened. So that's good. Now it's a matter of sustaining it, which I will repeat once again. We have 4 weeks till Monday Night Football starts. When that happens, Raw will take a hit. They have to have a plan in place. Listen, you got the build up to Clash of the Castle, great. But you better have some things planned in place to make that show be an alternative thought. Because you're going to want to make people say, okay, you're not going to make them stick to not watching Monday Night Football, but at least that first hour, you got a couple of minutes, you hook them in and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to switch between that and the game. You got it. At least you got that. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Now, as we saw, there was praise from many wrestling fans. They're talking about this article. Ciampa, the 3-woman team of Io Sky, Bayley and Dakota Kai, and Mustafa Ali being prominently featured. Edge appearing, calling out his former stable, the Judgment Day. You know, all of that is great. And the show for Raw did run smoothly. A lot of long matches. It didn't drag. And there wasn't any goofiness. Good. But we're still going to need some things that go epic. We just can't do a pedestrian show. And I really feel like there were times where NXT tried to do something a little more epic and it didn't hit. But I'll tell you, there's some things they could do to kind of help that out. But there has to be some time given on what they can do to develop stars, develop characters that are going to be standouts with or without a belt. Now, the first thing to do to go ahead and create legitimacy and get the legitimacy and value back to the mid-card belts, very smart. But let's just be honest, that's what AEW does. Like AEW, Tony Khan's booking is based on the titles that he has. He has lots of titles to work off of. What is it now? Trios Championship, TBS, TNT. He's got the women's title, the men's title, and he's got the All-Atlantic Championship, the Trios titles now. It's a lot. Plus the Ring of Honor, Pure, women's, TV, and men's title, the world title. All those belts can be used at any time at his disposal. And he has the rating system in place, which, listen, I know the K100 folks, Conan and Disco Inferno, they don't like that old system. Got it. Eric Bischoff tried that. It didn't work. You know, I get it. But the rating system, the records have worked for me. I think that's what makes AEW stand out. It's one of the signature things that I actually like on that show. And to give credence, legitimate credence as to why you could instantly have a match next week where the number one contender goes after the title, whichever title it is, fine. Because it makes sense. Plus, those contenders are being booked. You're seeing their rankings every week. Things like that. Maybe they're not on every single week. That's okay too. But again, variety of the matches, having title matches that are available and usable at any time for WWE. Listen, you got the singles titles right now. See, even without Roman Reigns and the combined titles, and Usos and the combined tag titles, you still got the women's tag titles. You still got the IC, the US. I mean, who knows what else they could do? Would Triple H legitimize a 24/7 for something? There's enough titles there, enough contenders matches, enough feuds they can create to keep a watchable product. But this show, there's a difference between NXT and here. Okay? What I need to make clear is that WWE and that main roster cannot be the black and gold NXT. When you look at AEW right now tonight, I mean, Undisputed Elite, here's 3 members of NXT right there. And then you look at what are the names they have that are on from former NXT roster that have moved over to AEW. Okay, a lot of the stars that Triple H might have had under that umbrella, they're already off to other organizations. Except for some of the ones that did make it over here and what he can try to do to build them up. When you look at the Viking Raiders, like, I want to see what Viking Raiders, what they do with them. Now that they've already repackaged them, brought them back again, will Triple H do something to kind of repackage them and bring them back to a certain place? When it comes to turning faces and heels, because to bring things back logically, when Becky Lynch turned back face, Ronda Rousey turned heel, and what they did with that. I mean, there's got to be still enough things on a show to take care of a what? 14, 18 segments on Raw and what, another 12 segments on Raw on SmackDown? That's a lot of ground to cover. 3 hours is still very long and dragging, but not as bad. And there were certain things throughout the show that made it good. But Triple H now, I mean, the reliance upon part-timers, I don't know if that stays around as much as it does. Because it was a Vince thing on really the decisions on putting that much money down on certain stars. Listen, I don't know what Logan Paul's getting, but it's nice to know that Logan Paul or Pat McAfee could be relied on to do matches that could fit on a big card. That's great. And novelty matches, which is what they want to have in some cases. Okay, I get that part. But then what else do you have? I mean, when you're looking at some of these bigger shows, you got to have enough that's out there. Plus for stadium shows, the draw. For what people want to praise Triple H for doing in his time, all I'm saying is that Triple H needs to rely on some of the other folks that he has around him to help build main eventers. And I'm going to say it, Paul Heyman, I don't know if there's any animosity or if there's any kind of cohesion between those two in the back, but Paul Heyman, Jeff Jarrett, you know what? You got to have some semblance of a kind of a booking committee, and not necessarily where the booking is being done, but a committee where there's a kind of a deeming of which stars are going to be pushed all the way to the moon that are going to get a chance to really be pushed. Now, yeah, you're going to have certain stars that'll get booked. They'll win. No more booking if somebody has a title and they keep losing. Good. There's still a whole lot to work on here. Because everybody wants to go ahead and dismiss Vince so quickly. That's fine. Look, the allegations of the financial statements, the recorrection of the financial statements of $14.6 million by Vince McMahon, that being done, yeah, you know what? I was fighting the inevitable to think that the story was not going to go ahead and go away. But when the SEC had to go and come back in and do this, we don't know anything else above that, but the investigation is still not done yet. But I'll say this, probably, I mean, listen, he probably did it. But the thing was, everybody wanted to go and see him get taken out. Fine. And that's what they wanted to do. Okay. Good for them. Vince is out, but while you're kicking him out the door and you want to make sure you kick him in the ass and make sure he doesn't miss the door on the way out, doesn't miss the door hitting his ass on the way out, right? Out of Titan Towers. While you guys are all praising and all relishing in the fact he's gone, You need to remember that he's the guy that really built all the main stars that you ever cared about. Now, we could say others are kind of instrumental, but look, of all the names of the Attitude Era that you wanted, he did create a lot of stars. I mean, hell, I just heard about The Rock. The fact of the matter is that The Godfather, in an interview I saw on TikTok today about the fact that he said, so Rocky being Rocky Maivia, we're going to put him in Nation of Domination. He's going to be a heel. And then when we turn him face, he's going to be one of the biggest stars ever. He was right. Sure, the mistake of Stone Cold Steve Austin and what they did with him, but the guidance of Vince Russo and Ferrara and whatever else they had going on over there to have Steve Austin come back and become Stone Cold and changing that up, that made a big difference. Vince McMahon created The Undertaker. Can't take that away from him. And how many stars did you see out there that were upset? And they were very, they were definitely perturbed on the fact of the shocking news. A lot of big stars would stand behind that man for what they've done, for what he's done for them in the business. John Cena would be one of them. I mean, you can't necessarily say it right now because of the allegations, but John Cena's career, Batista's career, The Rock's career, they're all instrumental because of Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon didn't just make stars. He made Hollywood blockbuster stars in some cases. Now, the fact that Triple H is going to reconcile Naomi and Sasha Banks back, wonderful. Sasha Banks getting back in. And by the way, I don't want them to be tag champs. I mean, unless you're going to do something really good with it, I guess, sure. But for me, I wish Sasha and Naomi would be split up again. And let's just get them back into the picture of a singles run. I mean, after Ronda Rousey gets finished up with Liv, or can we have Sasha and Ronda? We never got that, did we? I'd love to see that. And we know Charlotte's going to come back at some point. Let's get her back in there somewhere. Let's get some things going on once again. But the stars that are main eventers now, Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey. Now, Ronda being turned back, but no matter what, she's the draw. She's the draw anyway on the women's side, no matter what you say. And the mainstream press she always gets on a regular basis stands out so much. The main event has to be addressed. Sure, it's been 2 weeks, but I need to see that they're going to do something where they're not going to be afraid of making some booking decisions of what's going to happen with Roman and the Usos. I don't see them doing anything about if there's going to be any change to the brand split, which they can't do. The touring schedule does not allow it. Does not allow that to happen. I don't think they're ever going to change that out anytime soon. I think the way they have it set up right now, it also works for the broadcast partners. So you got to build two different rosters again. You are lightening the load on the roster. And by the way, the AEW free agents that could come some point, which Tony Khan has already talked about already, like he's being proactive right now, talking about it in the press. Let me pull that story up real quick, because I think that's important to say about where he feels things are. Because he already says now he's more concerned than ever about AEW stars jumping to the WWE. Because I mean, right now where everything is set, he knows that the dynamic without Vince changes things a lot. Not for everybody. He spoke with Sports Grid, Tony Khan, and he says that it's going to change the competition. He thinks it's a good thing, but he knows AEW has a big fan base. Although new people are taking over Vince's position, he doesn't think it'll be a bad thing for wrestling fans. And he also discussed the change how benefits between wrestlers, giving them more leverage to negotiate between two companies. The first time we've had this going back 20 years, since WCW. He says, quote, "Yeah, I think that's always been a concern, but now probably more so than ever. I imagine that great wrestlers are going to be in demand. Again, I think this is probably going to be good for the wrestling fans because that's one of the most exciting things about pro wrestling is free agency." And he has said it's one of those things missing from the business for almost 2 decades since WCW closed down. One of the worst things ever happened to wrestling. Yeah, he's right. Hat tip to F4W Online, by the way. So that right there says a lot. But I will believe that it's not going to make much of a difference. By the way, quick story. Do you know Tennille Dashwood is dating Madcap Moss? Good for him. Now, here's the thing. When you look at where things are with main eventers that you could build from within, there's not much from the NXT 2.0 roster you can go and pull up right now and do anything with. On the women's side, I think you can build main eventers a lot. The men's side is difficult because you have a lot of stars that have had a lot of traction in that company. And to take some of the stars that have been like pushed up and down and sideways and to try to get them up as legitimate main eventers, there's something to be said on what Paul Heyman did with Drew McIntyre. And the build of that star to where you stay. Same thing with Bobby Lashley. But those are two rare cases because of the fact that Drew and Bobby came from the previous regime and were around in the mid 2000s building themselves up. So all these stars from, over a decade ago are the ones main eventing now. If Cody Rhodes were healthy, he would be in that same picture. And Cody probably would have taken on Roman by now. So then you got a lot of older stars in their 40s that are here taking those main event spots. What's the future looking like? Who do you have? One thing I haven't seen yet, but that's obviously because of the fact that they have things going on with Seth Rollins and Riddle, and that feud eventually getting itself turned back up. Those two stars need to be pushed into main event. Kevin Owens should also be in that discussion. But, are you going to be able to do enough to go ahead and make them legitimate top draws? Like, does Triple H or the team now, without Vince, have the magic touch to make a star, if they wanted to, so popular that Hollywood calls them? Hollywood calls them for movies. Hollywood calls them for TV shows. Because that's what Vince used to do. Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, they all were able to get something up on other places because of the fact they got the appearances, they got up there, and I'll tell you what, popular. Because who knows? Becky Lynch could have gone a little bit farther probably in the career. We already heard about her possibly being in a Marvel movie before she had a child. And Sasha Banks, who knows what other deals would have come up. And like I said, maybe something that could have happened where she could have gone back. But, no matter what, you have all these stars that Vince made, or Vince can claim to have made, and he could probably take that claim and it's probably going to be legitimate. And what are you going to say about that? Triple H needs to be able to make his own stars. We went through the rosters last week. Who is there now on the main roster that we can speak about that could really do the same thing? Like, ask yourself that question. Who do you have now that you know about that you could absolutely, really change things up on that current roster now? Because if you look at the names on the Raw side, you have a lot of established names that have been around, that have muttered around near the main event or in mid-card. But what about people that are absolutely could be pushed right now without any kind of dissuading or any kind of, backlash from the crowds, or just that people call BS because they don't believe they can be pushed? If Big E were able to come back, I don't know if he can come back. Would Big E be somebody that would be brought back in to become a champion again or near that level and really be made something? That's one name as a possibility, but I don't know because he did get hurt and, the recovery's been where it is. Who else do you got? Damian Priest? I definitely know Cody Rhodes when he makes his way back, it'll be a big difference for him. Plus, I'm wondering where Cody Rhodes is when it comes to what stars, because of him, he'll be the bridge to bring certain AEW stars back in, which were former WWE stars. And all I'm saying is keep an eye out. And look, you might call me crazy. That's all right. But I would keep an eye on. I don't think you go back and bring Bryan Danielson back Adam Cole, if there's a contract deal there, maybe you try to bring him back. But I think he's pretty happy where he is in AEW. FTR? Who else? You're not bringing back CM Punk. You're not bringing... And, I mean, I don't think CM Punk has made... Well, he's been off TV, so I can't say much about how his star power is right now within the company. There's not a whole lot of people talking about him while he's been away. Unless he's on camera and he's there. But he's also, on the tail end of his career, he's been the one that's been not in the prime. He's just trying to go ahead and build the next star. So I don't think he's going to go back to Triple H. No. But then what other names do you have? And I'm looking through the list and I'm telling you, Omos? No. And you know what? I wonder if Omos is even going to be pushed. Because he wasn't on this week, was he? Not even in the picture. Where else does he go with things? Or do they just kind of put him by the wayside? And among the rest of the names they have here, no. There's not a lot here. Riddle, yes. But there's not a lot of stars that could just go ahead and say, okay, they've been booked okay, and they could push. Theory, it sounds like they're not even going to do that. Maybe the push for Theory is going to get pushed down. He's still got that briefcase. But once that briefcase is cashed in, what happens to him? Now, Theory got hurt. SummerSlam, I guess they're, selling the injury. Okay. Or he could be on Friday, whenever, who knows. Randy Orton also being out. We don't know where he's going to be at, but that's that part. And on the SmackDown side, let me just go back to that again here. If you look at the names they have over there, who do you have that you think would be pushed towards that main event? Do you think Gunther would be there? After working through as IC champ? Do you think Shinsuke Nakamura gets a rub once again and gets back up towards that top part, being booked better and having his full entrance and really be able to do something? Who else do you have? There's not much. Ridge Holland? No. And that's it. So they're going to have to find some new names to bring up and try to build. Because the stars they already have on the roster, the mid-card, there's not a lot of mid-card stars right now that you can build to main event. I don't believe so. So where are you going to find those stars? That's what you got to ask yourself. And I don't know what they do to get there. So they're going to be in a big quandary right now about that. So I want to take one of these positive articles here. We're going to take a little bit of... We're going to take some positive thinking and some negative thinking here. Because there are certain things that are being said critical and happy. So I'm going to take from a writer from Deadspin that wrote a story about Sam Fell's Triple H era starts with hope. I'm going to just take a few things off of this just to make the point of what he's saying and the positivity that you have right now of Triple H right now in the place. So with SummerSlam, you see that Triple H went for the women's division and the women's revolution on NXT and the main roster, basically what his legacy as a booker will lead off with. So what I think Triple H will do as well, which is very important, he's giving the women more time again. And I think there's going to be a balance of the women and men in general, which is good. They need that. The women should not just have like a couple of minutes in a match and that's it. Like to have multiple matches, multiple feuds? Yes. That's what NXT did very well with. And I think NXT did a really good job with the women's division anyway. I agree with that. It's not that hard for NXT to take some of the stars they have or the stars they had at NXT that would fit the role of being, model looks, be able to talk and be an appealing part of what the roster has. Because there is some of that across the whole gamut. I mean, when you look at some of the stars they brought in that are not necessarily like models you'd see on Playboy, but you would definitely see like, that guys would be gaga over. All right. You have those stars right now on the main roster. A lot of good women on that main roster. Then you look at what they have coming out of NXT. Pretty much the same. Toxic Attraction, Tiffany Stratton, Lash Legend, Roxanne Perez, Cora Jade. Yeah. They have appeal along the roster down in 2.0 and on the main roster. So, the women are always going to draw some eyeballs to TV on a regular basis. But then you need to be able to go ahead and build them to the point where they're going to be main eventers, which I will say that Triple H is responsible for that. Those NXT stars that he made, where when you saw coming out of Performance Center with Paige and AJ, what was it? With Paige, with Sasha, with Becky, with Charlotte, with Bianca, and I think eventually what's going to happen is Rhea and I hope Shayna Baszler as well. They're all going to get benefited from all that. Maybe even Lacey Evans. I'd love to see it. Moving along the story, he says now the Raw side of the division gets some new faces who can really go in a week on the job. He says that Triple H hasn't been shy about having people shit on things he clearly thought were silly by proxy. SmackDown, the line by Roman Reigns, taunting Theory by telling him Daddy's not here anymore. Michael Cole making comments about 25 years, not having some old man, yelling in his ear anymore. Drew McIntyre cutting a promo during SummerSlam about how tedious Brock and Roman facing off had gotten. And he says Trips has his finger on the pulse of what fans have been complaining about. Okay. But the core wrestling fans. This is the other thing I need to make a point of. The main eventers are broad-based, large, bigger-than-life stars. Vince was struggling to make those. Some of them happened by accident. Or just that machine is going to crank out a couple every so often. It's just going to happen. But what I will say is, when he says he has the finger on the pulse of what fans have been complaining about, we need to worry about new fans. Creating new fans, because that 2.3 million viewers, that's a curiosity. It's going to drop next week. I'm pretty sure of that. I don't know what SmackDown's going to do this week, but the same thing. We're in the summertime. What is there to watch? So for wrestling fans to be curious to go and, when there's nothing else on TV, for them to go and flip on Raw to see what's going on, good for them. But that's not going to stay like that. Monday Night Football is going to be coming back, and that's going to take a dent. Just make that point across real quick too, okay? Sports is going to come back into play, especially after baseball. Football will come back in. Basketball will come back in pretty soon. And the world will change there. So when you look at where things are about the pulse of the fans, there's talk now that the NIL program, because of the tryouts going really bad, according to Brian Alvarez, Wrestling Observer Newsletter. I get it. But the next in line program is there. And they've already been signing scholarships. They got people on board. I mean, Dwight Howard made a big deal out of that. That made some kind of a press, right? But what I'm saying is that you still need to find stars, and you need to find stars that draw. So if you look for stars from the MMA field, from other sports, that still needs to be somewhat of a priority, because we look at some of the stars you've had that were former sports stars and are excelling here. That's still something you got to think about. Because there are no independent wrestlers right now. And there are no AEW free agents. I'm sorry, there's not. For those of you out there, okay, pick a name on the podcasting roster, right? Wrestling Stoop, JD from NY206, Solomonster, Don Tony. All the fan podcasters. Much like myself. When everybody starts talking about, we should see these other stars come in to WWE, because now Triple H will go ahead and sign them. Okay. So you're trying to think about how many names are out there that can be brought over. Oh, okay. Well, MJF's contract, when it goes done, Triple H needs to sign him. Here's the fun one. From Ric Flair's last match. By the way, I did post shows for SummerSlam and Ric Flair's last match. Look for them at WrestlingIsReal.com. Pretty comprehensive. And one of the matches I featured and I talked about and I kept relishing about because I was looking forward to see what happened. And I talked about it on Sunday night. Josh Alexander and Jacob Fatu for the Impact World title. And how many people the next day were all over about Jacob Fatu, one of the best Samoans out there. Look at the guy, over 300 pounds. He can moonsault. I've been watching him for 3 years on MLW. Or it should be 2 years. No, 3. He's been on MLW, one of the longest reigning world heavyweight champions. All right. And by the way, just want to say that to make this point, there's been not a lot of world champions on that roster. Just want to give you that heads up too. Jacob Fatu is only the 8th reigning world heavyweight champion in Major League Wrestling. The longest reigning at 819 days. 819 days. Won it in 2019 at Kings of Coliseum. I'm just saying, Jacob Fatu has been there for a long time. He's so raw. That guy is so agile. That guy is just amazing. And the guy was much bigger before. And then he took some pounds off and he got himself in better shape. And he's even more agile than before. Yeah, Jacob Fatu would be incredible in another company. I don't know I don't know how Court Barrett's holding on to the guy, but I'm glad he is. So what, Alex Hammerstone? I mean, who do you have that's any other roster? If you want to just take a pick, somebody from Japan? Who do you get from Japan you want to take, huh? You think they're going to get anybody else from Japan that's going to come in? You think you're going to get somebody from Mexico that's going to come in, take a spot, be a main eventer? Do you think that you're going to have, I don't know, someone from the other rosters? Is there anybody in Impact you think that would be main eventing or be brought over that would be main eventing? Anybody from NWA? No. So there's no places necessarily you're going to get that level of talent, which means the machine that is WWE, Triple H needs to make sure that there are people that are working to design main eventers. People that are being built and chiseled and jacked and crafted to become world champions, become the top box office draws like a Roman Reigns, like the Usos, like a Brock Lesnar. They need to be built to the level to where they're going to go to Hollywood. They're going to go to SoFi Stadium and say, you know what? You're going to main event first night or second night of WrestleMania. And then next year at Philadelphia, Lincoln Financial Field, you're going to be main eventing there too. And we're not going to have to bring back The Rock. And we're not going to have to bring back Batista or some other name we got to bring in here somewhere, or Tyson Fury or whatever it might be. You're not going to have to go that route. Main eventers have to be made. The mid-card, this is the bread and butter for Triple H. He knows how to do this. He can make a lot of the regular, everyday TV product good, but the building of the storylines towards the matches, towards the pay-per-views, because in his role, he has to be able to go and build something like the Clash at the Castle. That's based on booking that's already been done, not anything he's done yet. So far in the matches you got Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre right now. And there was a setup with Sheamus and Drew McIntyre to set up who would take on Roman Reigns. That match is set. But that show's in 4 weeks. They need to build some more names. Plus, they're going to get a lot of press that's going to be going on for All Out. For AEW, because they're going to have that whole weekend in Chicago. So they're going to have to go up against that too and keep the buzz for that. You got 4 weeks to build to that. And then you just need to start building some feuds, building some stars that you really have something to go with. Because I want to know who they have out there that's going to really be enough and big enough to make much of a difference. Because I don't know yet. Another story that came in, this is from Andrew Ravens at WrestlingNews.co, backstage news on Optimism WWE with Triple H and Creative. So there's some talk. More fresh matches, more wrestling, stakes on the line, and more women's wrestling featured. That's the mid-card. Fightful Select reported even people not on the show seem excited about the future. After talking with several wrestlers, they indicated they have a renewed optimism with Triple H heading up Creative. 2 top stars said they were excited not to wrestle the same person every week. Hopeful they will continue going forward and seen as a key move. These are small, incremental changes. It's aesthetics. It's optics. But it's nothing when it comes to the real changes. Triple H also being credited for having visions and integrating things that were previously Vince projects. Maximum male models, which is a pretty cool thing to have on SmackDown. I've enjoyed it, I said. What else is next from that is the question. But that's not going to be the most important thing. We need to build the next Roman Reigns, the next Brock Lesnar, the next Charlotte Flair, the next Becky Lynch. Who's going to fill those roles? We need the up-and-coming main eventers now. And there are those that have been in that main event spot that can be reheated once again to get there. Sasha Banks can get back up there. You can, on the women's side, you could have Bayley obviously get back up there. Alexa Bliss can go back up there. But she never just was at that level, but I think I always put her in that kind of category to myself. On the men's side, yeah, Kevin Owens, Seth Rollins, absolutely. You got Riddle that's in the ranks right now being pushed up. You'll have Cody back, but you need more. You got to have more. And as far as I'm concerned, any of the stars you have right now that are being built in the IC title or the US title, they're not world title material. They're not. Gunther, I don't know. And not right away. Maybe. Like, I don't want to rule it out, but of the people they have right now in their AJ Styles, do you want to reheat him too? Sure. But who else is there that are really going to be standing out that could be up and near that main event picture? To keep fresh main events going forward when they have to go to the stadiums, when they have to go to Saudi Arabia, when they have to do another run of WrestleMania, go back to Las Vegas for Money in the Bank. Because I'm pretty sure Money in the Bank, they're going to do another arena again. They're not going to do arena, they're going to do stadium. They'll probably just change the dates this time around. But they're going to want to do more stadium shows. That's a Nick Khan objective. So you need to build the stars. As I said, we were supposed to have 8 stadium shows this year. You got one more in Saudi Arabia, and then you got this show here. And then you got a big show for Survivor Series at TD Garden in Boston. You got to build those out. They have to be big and important. What do you do next? So let me get back to the story from Sam Fells and Deadspin. Look, they're all going to do the same thing where they're all kind of pointing out the same kind of positive things that are going on. But nobody's talking about the big picture. I want to see if Sam actually talks about this. But let's go ahead and go into this real quick. He goes on and says that commentary now is not being afraid to talk like real people. Like even Vic Joseph and Wade Barrett sounded subtle and subdued on NXT. Like I didn't hear not Vic Joseph going in it's a near fall. Ah! Right? He was going always that yelling on after every like move. He's not doing that now. And then referencing changes that everyone knows about anyway, instead of pretending there's nothing to see here, the whole thing had a new feel. Well, NXT had that feel. It's never going to be a work rate company. It's still based on memorable moments. But the thing is that, yeah, AEW is a work rate company. And all these other companies, Impact and MLW and NWA, they're all work rate companies. You're absolutely correct. Because they're catering to the core wrestling fans. WWE cannot just be to the core. 2.3 million viewers, that's probably their regular audience. If they're all enthusiastic and watching. That's what you got left of the erosion of this constant downfall and decline since the invasion angle of 2001. That's precipitously declined across the board. From 8-9 million viewers down to 2.5. These broadcast partners, especially with Vince out of the picture, they're not going to be content with this. They need more. They want a bigger audience. If football and basketball can pull bigger numbers, then WWE needs to be able to do that. And bring in younger viewers. Especially if you want to get their contracts all taken care of for 2024. Now, I don't know who was the one that was behind the tractor pull, the tractor tilting the ring, and who was brought that. Now, he says here that Brock tilting the ring with a goddamn tractor is what everyone will take out of it. The kind of silliness and Bob Mass that Vince couldn't bring himself to author or didn't have the sense of humor for, or at least not anymore, but this is what WWE should be. Right. Everyone's talking about it. Also covered for the fact that the rest of the Lesnar-Reigns match was yet another that just didn't quite live up to the billing, though everyone's fatigue of this rivalry, it probably couldn't have. So there's that story right there. We just talked about what backstage are saying about this now. And I don't know what to think here, but there's nothing that tells me right now there's a big difference. But I go back to Paul Heyman in the original part of my discussion, because he did. And Paul Heyman said at the time to Ariel Helwani about doing the executive director position, he said, quote, "When I took the role of executive director, I made an agreement with Vince McMahon. I want this job as long as every morning Vince McMahon woke up, he said, thank God, or whatever deity he subscribes to, that Paul Heyman is looking after the store on Raw. And the day that Vince McMahon didn't wake up and feel that way, I didn't want the job anymore. I've been in a similar role when Vince was not happy with me and it's a miserable existence. I didn't want it. And apparently on that day, on that given time and given moment, Vince didn't wake up that morning thinking whatever deity he subscribes to that Paul Heyman was in charge of Raw. We left with a smile, a handshake, and a hug. No harsh feelings, and actually better feelings about each other because of the way it ended, because it ended miserably before." And at the time, Vince McMahon said that he thought Paul did a great job creatively. There were a lot of things that happened with what they were doing with storylines that did make people talk. And the shows were not bad. I mean, listen, I wasn't necessarily hot on Humberto Carrillo getting a push, but hey, it was something. The same thing here. But there are a lot of fans. There was a groundswell of the black and gold fan base for NXT that are really pulling for the main roster to actually take some of that fire, some of that energy that they had over there. Because they did have energy over there. But like I said, there's a lot of those stars that were novelties that came in and just dropped off. And there's not enough stars right now to really make much of a difference. And just doing what NXT Black and Gold was is not the answer. It never was. And I will say this over again, because of the fact that Triple H might have had what he did over there. It didn't draw the viewers to at least counteract with AEW, which basically still has the same audience that was watching WWE when it was better. Look, you might have gotten a couple of AEW fans that have been very bitter to never watch the WWE again. They probably were curious to watch the product this time. So you got some of them. But that's not a big enough audience. And the stars that you have, you need a future. And you need to have some fresh names, because look, the current title pictures right now with the Usos and with Roman Reigns, they have no contenders whatsoever. You need to build contenders for both. The women's side, you got a lot to work with. It's still a relatively new division. And there's not been a whole lot done to the women's division to really screw things up. Not enough. But you need to build contenders. And not just contenders. They need to be draws. They need to be larger than life. They need to be as big as Roman, as big as Ronda, as big as Brock Lesnar. That level of epic notoriety. And they get talked about everywhere. And what they do goes viral. You have to create that. And I don't know what you do to get there, but we need to work on that pretty soon. One other thing I want to talk about, I'm not going to get to an hour because I'm already kind of running out of what I need to talk about. One other thing coming about AEW, which was interesting, is they're making some changes over on their end of things. Those announcements that were made this week. I won't talk about AEW, except for the fact it was really good tonight. They're building the matches. Things are kind of working out good. Let's get to this. Expansion of talent relations development team. So quickly, Tony Khan expanded talent relations with the promotions of key staff members, including Sanjay Dutt, QT Marshall, Pat Buck, and Tony Schiavone. In addition, Madison Rayne will join AEW as a coach in the women's division. That's a good move. And this new expanded talent relations team will strengthen the infrastructure required to facilitate development, health, and safety of the AEW roster. So good for all that. I'm not going to go into the details of who's what, but there's that they're going to look at. By the way, next week, there will be another pay-per-view. I don't know if I'm going to... maybe I'll do a post show for that. I'm not sure. From Cicero Stadium, Chicago, Illinois, Impact Wrestling's Emergence. Jordan Grace will face Mia Yim for the Knockouts title. Knockouts tag team titles on the line. With VXT, which is Deanna Pratt and Chelsea Green going after Rosemary and Taya Valkyrie. Alex Shelley will go after the Impact World title against Josh Alexander, the title holder. And a 10-man tag, Honor No More, which is Eddie Edwards, Matt Taven, Mike Bennett, Kenny King, and PCO versus Bullet Club, Good Brothers, Ace Austin, Chris Bay, and Hikuleo. If Honor No More loses, they must disband. And Bandito versus Ray Orris also in that match. Ooh, that's good stuff. But again, Cicero Stadium, they always like their lucha over there in Chicago, especially at that arena. So anyway, that's the show. I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening in, finding the show as you always do, subscribing as you always do. Come back for another Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us. Thank you for listening to the Wrestling is Real podcast. You can find all previous episodes at wrestlingisreal.com or subscribe to the show on all major podcast outlets, including Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Follow the King of Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at King of Podcasts, and search King of Podcasts on YouTube, or type youtube.com/JBRASCO951. This has been a presentation of the King of Podcasts Radio Network.